The coffee maker gurgled its last drops into Marcus Webb's favorite mug when he heard the screaming outside. It wasn't the usual neighborhood commotion of kids playing or dogs barking. This was different. This was primal terror bleeding through the crisp October morning air. Marcus moved toward his kitchen window, steam rising from his untouched coffee, and peered through the curtains at Maple Street below. What he saw made his blood run cold. Old Mr. Patterson from number 42 was stumbling across the Hendersons' pristine lawn, but something was terribly wrong with him. His gait was jerky, unnatural, like a marionette controlled by a drunk puppeteer. His mail carrier uniform was torn and stained with something dark that Marcus hoped wasn't blood, but deep down knew it was. Then Marcus saw Patterson's face, or what remained of it. Gray skin hung loose on his skull, one eye milky white and lifeless, the other socket empty and weeping dark fluid. Patterson's mouth hung open impossibly wide, jaw unhinged, releasing a low moan that Marcus could hear even through the double-paned glass. Across the street, Jennifer Martinez had been loading her 2 kids into her minivan for school. She froze, car keys dangling from her trembling hand as Patterson lurched toward them. Her daughter, maybe 7 years old with her pink backpack still hanging from one shoulder, screamed. That scream snapped Jennifer into action. She shoved both children into the van and slammed the door just as Patterson's decaying hand slapped against the window, leaving streaks of something Marcus didn't want to identify. The van's engine roared to life and Jennifer reversed wildly, tires squealing, clipping her own mailbox before speeding down the street. Patterson stumbled after the vehicle for a few feet before his attention shifted to something else, someone else. Marcus backed away from the window, his heart hammering against his ribs. His phone buzzed insistently on the counter. 17 missed calls from his sister Amanda, 3 from his coworker Tyler, and countless emergency alerts flooding his screen. He swiped one open with shaking fingers. Emergency alert, remain indoors. Lock all doors and windows. Avoid contact with infected individuals. Military response en route. This is not a drill. Infected. The word hung in his mind like a death sentence. Marcus had seen enough movies to know what this looked like, but his rational brain rejected it. Zombies weren't real. They couldn't be real. Another scream outside shattered that denial into a million pieces. Through the window, he saw more of them now. Mrs. Chen from the corner house, still wearing her yoga pants and tank top, moved with that same horrifying jerky motion. Behind her, 3 more figures emerged from the Martinez house across the street. Jennifer hadn't been fast enough after all. The father, Eduardo, stumbled out first, followed by what looked like their teenage son. The third figure was too small, wearing a pink backpack. Marcus turned away, bile rising in his throat. His phone rang, Amanda's face filling the screen. He answered on the first ring. Marcus. Oh God, Marcus, are you okay? Her voice was frantic, punctuated by heavy breathing. I'm home. I'm safe. Where are you? Marcus moved away from the window, heading toward his basement door. Some instinct told him he needed to get underground, get somewhere with fewer entry points. I'm at the hospital, Amanda sobbed, and Marcus's stomach dropped. She was a nurse at County General, right in the heart of downtown. It started here, Marcus. In the emergency room. Someone came and bit, just a bite wound we thought, but then he turned and bit a doctor and it just spread so fast. We tried to contain it but there were too many. I'm hiding in a supply closet on the 4th floor and they're everywhere. I can hear them in the hallways, Marcus. They're eating people. Her voice broke completely, dissolving into terrified sobs. Marcus gripped the phone so hard his knuckles went white. "Amanda, listen to me. Stay quiet. Stay hidden. I'm coming to get you." Even as the words left his mouth, he knew how insane they sounded. Going outside right now was suicide. Going downtown into what Amanda described would be worse than suicide. "No. Marcus, don't you dare leave your house. You can't help me. You'll just die too." A crash echoed through her end of the line, followed by that same horrible moaning Marcus had heard from Patterson. "They're breaking through the door," Amanda whispered. "I love you, big brother." The line went dead. Marcus stood frozen in his kitchen, phone still pressed to his ear, listening to silence where his sister's voice had been moments before. Marcus didn't remember dropping the phone or sliding down the kitchen cabinet to the floor, but suddenly he was there, knees pulled to his chest, breath coming in ragged gasps. Amanda was gone. His little sister who used to make him play tea party with her stuffed animals, who called him every Sunday without fail, who sent him terrible memes at 2 a.m. Gone. The moaning outside grew louder, multiplied, a chorus of the damned that pulled Marcus back from the edge of complete breakdown. Grief was a luxury he couldn't afford right now. Amanda's last words echoed in his mind. "Don't leave the house." She was right. Going out there now wouldn't save her. It would just add one more body to the horde. Marcus forced himself to his feet, legs shaking, and began to think. Survival. That was the only goal now. He moved through his house with new eyes, seeing it not as the cozy bungalow he'd bought 3 years ago but as a potential fortress or a tomb depending on his next decisions. First, the doors. He had 3 entry points: front door, back door, and the door to the garage. Marcus ran to each one, checking locks, throwing deadbolts, dragging furniture to create barricades. The heavy oak bookshelf went against the front door, books tumbling to the floor in his haste. The kitchen table, legs scraping gouges in the hardwood he'd once cared about, wedged against the back door. Through the back window, he could see his neighbor's yard. David Thornton, the accountant who complained about every little thing, was on his deck grilling. Or rather, what used to be David Thornton was attempting to operate a grill, hands pawing uselessly at the metal lid, drawn by some residual memory of routine. His face had been partially torn away, exposing teeth and jawbone. Marcus yanked the curtains closed and moved on. Windows. He had 12 windows on the ground floor. Marcus ran to his garage, stepping over the clutter of his normal life that now seemed absurd. Golf clubs he hadn't used in a year. Christmas decorations. A bicycle with 2 flat tires he kept meaning to fix. He grabbed his toolbox and a stack of plywood left over from a renovation project he'd abandoned. For the next 2 hours, Marcus worked with frantic energy, nailing plywood over every ground floor window. The hammering was loud, probably attracting attention, but it couldn't be helped. Each strike of the hammer punctuated his new reality. Bang. Amanda is dead. Bang. The world is ending. Bang. You're alone. As he finished the last window, he heard them gathering outside. The moans grew louder, more insistent. Fists began pounding on his front door, a rhythmic thudding that made his skin crawl. They were drawn to the noise, just like in the movies. At least that part was predictable. Marcus climbed the stairs to his second floor and peered out his bedroom window. What he saw made his chest tighten with despair. Maple Street was unrecognizable. At least 20 of those things shambled through what had been a quiet suburban neighborhood. Cars sat abandoned, doors hanging open, some still running with driver seats empty or occupied by torn corpses. The Hendersons' house was on fire, black smoke billowing from the second-floor windows, but no fire trucks came screaming down the street. No one was coming to help because everyone was either dead, dying, or fighting their own desperate battles for survival. Movement in the house across the street caught his attention. Behind a second-floor window, he saw a face. Tyler Moss, a high school teacher who lived alone and always waved when they both took out trash on Thursday mornings. Tyler was alive, pressed against his window, eyes wide with terror. He was holding a sign scrawled on what looked like poster board, "Help. No food. Please." Marcus's first instinct was to look away, to pretend he hadn't seen it. He had his own survival to worry about. But Tyler saw him, made desperate eye contact, and pressed the sign harder against the glass. Marcus held up one finger. Wait. He didn't know what he was promising, didn't know if he could help at all, but the gesture seemed to calm Tyler slightly. Marcus stepped back from the window and took inventory of his situation. He had maybe 2 weeks of food if he rationed carefully. His pantry held canned goods, pasta, rice, and protein bars from a fitness kick that hadn't lasted. Water would be the issue. If the utilities went down, he had perhaps 3 days of water in his heater and pipes. He filled every container he could find, pots, pans, his bathtub, even vases and mixing bowls. The water still ran clear and cold from the tap, but for how long? His phone had stopped receiving calls, but the emergency broadcasts continued, each one more dire than the last. The infection had spread beyond the city. Reports coming from across the state, across the country. The military was establishing safe zones, but the locations kept changing as each zone was overrun. The government urged calm while society collapsed in real time. Marcus tried calling Amanda's phone 17 times, knowing she wouldn't answer, unable to stop himself from hoping. As darkness fell on that first day, Marcus sat in his bedroom closet with the door cracked, a baseball bat across his lap. It was the only weapon he had unless he counted kitchen knives, and somehow the bat felt more substantial, more real. The sounds outside changed as night came. The moaning continued but was now joined by crashes, breaking glass, car alarms, and worst of all, screams. Human screams that ended abruptly or faded into wet gurgling sounds that haunted him. Marcus woke with a start, neck cramped from sleeping upright in the closet, the baseball bat having slipped from his lap onto the floor with a clatter that made his heart race. Pale morning light filtered through the gaps in his bedroom curtains. For one blissful moment, he thought it had all been a nightmare. Then he heard the moaning outside, constant now like tinnitus, and reality crashed back down. He stood on stiff legs and crept to the window. The street below looked like a war zone. More cars had crashed during the night, including a police cruiser embedded in the Johnsons' front porch. Bodies littered the pavement, some clearly dead, others twitching with the early stages of turning. The horde had grown. Marcus counted at least 40 of them wandering aimlessly, bumping into each other, into cars, into mailboxes. They seemed less aggressive without living prey to chase, operating on some kind of energy-saving mode. Movement across the street drew his attention. Tyler was at his window again, this time frantically waving. He held up a new sign, "Others alive. Need plan." Marcus frowned and looked up and down the street with new focus. There, 2 houses down, a curtain twitched in the Williams house. An older couple, retired, kept to themselves mostly. In the other direction, he spotted a face in the second-floor window of the modern townhouse that always seemed to have parties before the world ended. A young woman, maybe mid-20s, with dark hair pulled back. She was watching Tyler too. Marcus grabbed a whiteboard he used for grocery lists and a marker. He wrote in large letters, "How many?" Tyler disappeared from view and returned minutes later with a response, "5 of us." Radio? Radio. Marcus mentally kicked himself. He had an old ham radio in his basement that his father had given him years ago. He'd never learned to use it properly, but if others had them, maybe they could communicate without drawing the attention that shouting would bring. He gave Tyler a thumbs up and carefully made his way downstairs, stepping over his makeshift barricades. The basement was dark and musty, untouched by the chaos above. Marcus found the radio on a shelf, dusty but intact, and hauled it upstairs. It took him 20 minutes of fumbling with frequencies before his speaker crackled to life. Anyone can hear this, we're organizing on frequency 146.52. Repeat, survivors in the Maple Street area, switch to 146.52. The voice was female, young, probably the woman from the townhouse. Marcus adjusted his dial and pressed the transmit button. This is Marcus Webb, 2247 Maple Street. I can hear you. Static, then, Marcus. Oh, thank God. This is Rachel Kim, 2267 Maple Street, the corner unit. I have Tyler Moss, Beth and Harold Williams, and Garrett Foster checked in so far. Are you injured? Bitten? No, I'm okay. Alone. You? Marcus surprised himself with how steady his voice sounded. Same. I'm a medical student, 3rd year, so if anyone gets hurt I have some training. Tyler's a teacher, says he has food for maybe a week. The Williams are older, they're worried about medications running out. Garrett's in the house next to yours, the blue colonial. He's got his wife Shannon and their infant daughter. An infant. Marcus closed his eyes. A baby crying would be like a dinner bell for those things. What's the plan? He asked. Honestly? I'm making this up as I go, Rachel admitted. But together we're smarter than alone, right? First thing, we need to know what resources we have. Food, water, medical supplies, weapons. Can everyone check their supplies and report back in 10 minutes? A chorus of agreements came through the radio, some voices steadier than others. Harold Williams sounded old and frightened. Garrett's voice was tight with barely controlled panic. Tyler spoke with forced cheerfulness that didn't quite mask his terror. But they were all alive, all thinking, all human. Marcus spent the next 10 minutes cataloging everything useful in his house. The list was depressing. Limited food, no medical supplies beyond basic first aid, his only weapons were the baseball bat and kitchen knives. When they reconvened, the collective inventory wasn't much better. Rachel had the most medical supplies, raiding her own student kit. Garrett, it turned out, was a gun enthusiast and had 3 firearms with limited ammunition. Beth Williams was diabetic and had maybe a month of insulin if she was careful. The baby, Emma, needed formula that Shannon said would last 2 weeks at most. We need more supplies, Rachel said, stating the obvious. There's a pharmacy 3 blocks down, and that grocery store on Hamilton Avenue is maybe half a mile. Might as well be on the moon, Garrett cut in. Have you seen how many of those things are out there? We wouldn't make it to the end of the block. He's right, Marcus agreed, watching the horde through his window. But we can't just wait here to starve either. Maybe at night? They seem slower, less active. Or maybe they just hunt better in the dark, Tyler said quietly. We don't know anything about them really. How they spread it, if everyone who dies turns, how long it takes, if they need to eat or if they just kill. We're assuming based on movies and games, but this is real. The radio fell silent as that truth settled over them. This was real. The rules were unknown. One mistake would mean death or worse. My wife is getting sick, Garrett's voice suddenly broke through, thick with emotion. Shannon. She said she's fine but she's been coughing, fever started this morning. She says it's just stress, but what if it's not? What if you can catch it without being bitten? What if we're all already infected? Panic rippled through the radio chatter, multiple voices talking over each other until Rachel's voice cut through. Stop. Everyone stop. Garrett, is she injured at all? Any scratches, any wounds? A pause. No. No bites or anything. She's just sick. Could be flu, could be stress like she says. Then we don't panic, Rachel said firmly. We observe. We stay calm. Panic kills us faster than those things will. Now, we need to make a decision. Do we sit tight and hope for rescue, or do we take action? Marcus looked out at the street, at the shuffling corpses of his neighbors, at the smoke rising from distant fires that no one would extinguish. He thought of Amanda in that hospital, waiting for rescue that never came. Rescue isn't coming, he said. Or if it is, it won't be in time. We have to save ourselves. Agreed, Tyler chimed in. But how? It was Beth Williams, quiet until now, who offered an unexpected suggestion. The houses. We could go through the houses. Most of these backyards connect. If we could get from house to house without going on the street, we could search for supplies, maybe even find other survivors. Harold and I, we're old but we know this neighborhood. We know who has what, who's gone on vacation, whose houses might be empty or safe. The idea was brilliant in its simplicity and terrifying in its execution. Marcus stared at the wall separating his house from Garrett's blue colonial, mentally measuring the distance between their back doors through the yards. 30 feet, maybe 40, with a wooden privacy fence between them. It could work, Rachel's voice crackled through the radio. But we'd need to be absolutely silent. One noise, one mistake, and we draw them all to us. We'd also need to know which houses are clear and which ones have those things inside, Tyler added. Going in blind could be a death sentence. Marcus pressed his face against the small gap in his bedroom curtains, studying the visible backyards. Most were empty, gates closed. But in the Pattersons' yard 2 houses down, he could see movement. 3 of them, trapped behind a fence they lacked the cognitive function to open, endlessly circling the small space like grotesque goldfish in a bowl. We map it first, Marcus suggested. Everyone check what you can see from your windows. Which yards look clear, which houses have movement, where the fences are highest. We make a route that avoids as much risk as possible. For the next hour, they worked together over the radio, building a collective map of their neighborhood. Rachel had paper and drew it out based on everyone's observations. The safest route would take them from house to house in a zigzag pattern, avoiding the street entirely, ending at the Kowalski house 4 properties down from Marcus. Why the Kowalskis? Garrett asked. I know them, Beth explained. They went to Florida 2 weeks ago to visit their daughter. House should be empty. And Frank Kowalski is one of those doomsday preppers. He's got a basement full of supplies, always bragging about it at the neighborhood watch meetings. Canned food, water, batteries, probably weapons too. A prepper's house. That could change everything. Okay, Rachel said, her voice taking on a leadership quality that Marcus found himself grateful for. We need a team. Not everyone can go. Beth and Harold, you're more valuable giving us information. Garrett, you need to stay with Shannon and Emma. That leaves Marcus, Tyler, and me. I'm coming too, Garrett protested. I have the guns. And a sick wife and baby daughter who need you, Rachel countered gently but firmly. If something happens to you, what happens to them? We need you as our home base, our security. Can you cover us from your window? You said you have a rifle. A long pause. Yeah. Yeah, I can do that. Second floor bedroom has a clear sight line to most of the backyards. Then that's your job. Marcus, Tyler, can you both be ready in 30 minutes? Wear dark clothes, nothing that makes noise. Bring bags for supplies. Weapons if you have them. Marcus looked down at his shaking hands. This was insane. 12 hours ago he'd been worried about a presentation at work. Now he was planning to navigate through a neighborhood full of walking corpses. I'll be ready, he said, hoping it was true. 28 minutes later, Marcus stood at his back door, baseball bat in hand, a backpack slung over his shoulders. He'd dressed in black jeans and a dark navy hoodie, the closest thing to tactical gear he owned. His hands had stopped shaking, replaced by an odd calm. This was happening. He was doing this. The radio crackled. "Marcus, can you see your back fence from where you are?" Rachel asked. "Yeah, I'm at the door." "Okay. On my count, we all go out together. Move quick but quiet to the fence line. Tyler, you're going first over the fence into the Hendersons' yard. It looked clear from my angle. Marcus, you follow. I'll come last. Garrett, are you in position?" "I'm here," Garrett's voice responded. "I've got eyes on the route. Currently clear, but there's a group of 4 wandering near the street about 50 yards out. Move fast." Marcus's heart hammered against his ribs. Through the small window in his back door, he could see his yard, overgrown grass he'd been meaning to mow, his sad little vegetable garden now gone to seed. It looked peaceful, normal, like nothing had changed. 3, Rachel counted down. 2. 1. Go. Marcus yanked open the door and ran. The October air hit his face, cool and carrying the scent of smoke and something worse, something rotting. His feet pounded across the grass toward the fence. Ahead, he saw Tyler, lanky and fast, hit the fence and scramble over with surprising agility. Marcus reached the wood barrier and jumped, fingers gripping the top, splinters digging into his palms. He hauled himself up and over, dropping into the Hendersons' yard with a thud that sounded explosively loud to his terrified ears. Tyler crouched by the back wall of the house, eyes wide, holding a crowbar like his life depended on it because it did. Rachel landed beside Marcus a moment later, graceful and quiet, a kitchen knife in each hand. "Henderson's back door," she whispered, pointing. The door hung open, darkness beyond. Not ideal, but it was the route they'd mapped. Tyler moved first, creeping to the doorway, peering inside. He held up a hand, "Wait," then gestured them forward. The Henderson house was a tomb. They moved through the kitchen where breakfast sat abandoned on the table, cereal soggy in bowls of curdled milk. Family photos smiled down from the walls, frozen moments of happiness now obscene in their normalcy. A sound from upstairs froze all 3 of them. Creaking floorboards. Slow, dragging footsteps. Upstairs, Rachel breathed, barely audible. They moved faster, crossing through the living room to the front hallway where another back door led to the next yard. Tyler's hand was on the doorknob when the moaning started above them, followed by thumping. Something was moving on the second floor, drawn by the noise of their passage. "Go, go, go," Marcus urged. Tyler yanked open the door and they spilled out into the Williams' backyard. Behind them, through the Henderson house, Marcus heard a crash and then a figure appeared at the back door they'd just exited. Jennifer Henderson, or what remained of her, still wearing her bathrobe, face gray and eyes milky. She saw them, opened her mouth impossibly wide, and released a moan that was answered by others in the distance. "She's calling them," Rachel gasped. "Move." They ran across the Williams' yard. Harold had said the back door would be unlocked and it was, bless him. They tumbled into the house, Marcus slamming the door behind them. Beth and Harold stood in their kitchen, both pale as ghosts. "That noise," Harold said, voice shaking. "They'll come." He was right. Through the windows, Marcus could see them responding, shuffling with increased purpose toward the sound. Their route was compromised. They'd have to adapt or die. "Basement," Beth whispered urgently, pointing to a door off the kitchen. "Go down, there's a cellar exit to the outside. Comes up in the backyard near the fence line to the next property." They could hear them now, multiple sets of dragging feet, moans growing louder as the horde converged on the Henderson house. Rachel grabbed Beth's hand. "Come with us. You and Harold. It's not safe here anymore." "We're too slow," Harold said with heartbreaking clarity. "You 3 go. We'll lock ourselves in the upstairs bedroom. We've got food up there, water." We'll be quiet. They'll follow you and leave us alone. Marcus wanted to argue, but the sound of breaking glass from the direction of the Henderson house cut off any debate. They were out of time. Tyler was already at the basement door, holding it open. Now or never, folks. Marcus, Rachel, and Tyler thundered down the wooden stairs into the musty darkness. Behind them, Beth and Harold locked the basement door, their footsteps retreating upstairs. The basement was cluttered with decades of accumulated life, boxes of Christmas decorations, old furniture, the archaeology of a long marriage. Tyler found the cellar exit, a slanted wooden door that opened to the outside. He lifted it slowly, hinges creaking, revealing a set of concrete steps leading up to the backyard. The yard was clear, but beyond the fence, in the Henderson property, they could see them gathering. At least a dozen of those things, pawing at the house, some attempting to climb through windows, others just pressing against the walls like moths to a flame. They're distracted, Rachel observed. We use it. 2 more houses and we're at the Kowalskis. We can make it. They climbed out of the cellar and moved in a crouch toward the back fence. Marcus's legs burned, adrenaline making every sense hyper-aware. He could hear Tyler's breathing, too fast. Could smell the smoke still drifting from the burning houses. Could feel sweat running down his back despite the cool air. The fence was chest high. Tyler went over first, then turned to help Rachel. Marcus took one last look back at the Williams house and saw Beth and Harold at their upstairs window, watching them. Beth raised a hand in farewell. Marcus returned it, throat tight, knowing he'd probably never see them again. He scrambled over the fence into the Morrison house yard. The Morrisons had been the young family, 2 kids under 10, always playing in the yard. The swing set stood empty now, moving slightly in the breeze with a creaking sound that set Marcus's teeth on edge. Their back door was closed, but a window had been broken, glass scattered on the patio. Around the side, Rachel pointed to a gate leading to the front yard. We cross to the next property, avoid going through. They moved along the side of the house, pressing against the vinyl siding. Voices reached them from inside the Morrison house. Not moaning. Talking. Human voices. Marcus held up a hand and they froze. Through the broken window, he could hear them clearly now. Can't stay here. We need to get to the school. The radio said they're setting up a shelter at Lincoln High. With what gas, Derek? The car's empty. We'd have to go on foot with 2 kids through that nightmare out there. So we just wait? Wait for them to break in? Wait to starve? The voices dissolved into arguing, stress and fear making them sharp with each other. Marcus recognized Derek Morrison's voice. They were alive, barricaded inside, probably didn't even know people were moving through the yards outside. We should tell them about the network, Tyler whispered. They could use the radios. Or they could panic and make noise and get us all killed, Rachel countered. After. We tell them after we secure the supplies. It felt wrong to leave them in ignorance, but Rachel had a point. They kept moving, reaching the gate to the front yard. Marcus peered around the corner and his blood turned to ice. The front street was packed with them. Not the dozen or so that had been there this morning, but hundreds, a river of undead flesh flowing down Maple Street from the direction of downtown. Some were fresh, newly turned, still wearing business suits and hospital scrubs. Others were decayed, must have been dead for days, skin sloughing off bones. The horde from the city had found the suburbs. Oh God, Tyler breathed. We can't go back. We can't go forward. We're trapped. Rachel's face had gone pale, but her voice stayed steady. The Kowalski house is right there. 1 more property over. We can make it if we're quiet. She was right. The Kowalskis' large brick house was visible just beyond the next fence. So close. But between them and safety, the horde shuffled past, a wall of death just 30 feet away on the other side of the Morrison house. One sound, one glimpse of movement, and that entire mass would turn on them. They backtracked to the backyard, every step careful, controlled. The fence to the next property was taller here, almost 7 feet, separating the Morrison yard from the Kowalskis. Marcus laced his fingers together, making a stirrup. Tyler first, then you boost Rachel, then we both pull me up. Tyler stepped into Marcus's hands and Marcus lifted, muscles straining. Tyler gripped the top of the fence and pulled himself up, swung a leg over, and dropped to the other side with a soft thump. Rachel went next, lighter and faster. Then it was Marcus's turn. He jumped, fingers barely catching the top of the fence. His feet scrabbled against the wood, finding no purchase. He was dangling, exposed, arms burning with the effort of holding on. Tyler's hands grabbed his wrists from the other side. "I've got you. Walk up the fence." Marcus walked his feet up the wooden slats, Tyler pulling from the other side, until he could get his chest over the top. He rolled over the fence and dropped into the Kowalski yard, landing hard on his shoulder. Pain shot through his arm but nothing felt broken. The Kowalski house loomed before them, dark and silent. 2 stories of brick with a basement that supposedly held salvation. They approached the back door, Rachel testing the handle. "Locked. We break it or find another way?" Tyler asked. Breaking it meant noise. Noise meant death. Marcus circled the house, checking windows. At the back corner, he found one cracked open, probably for ventilation. It was small, maybe big enough to squeeze through. "Here," he called softly. Tyler wedged his crowbar under the window and slowly, carefully, lifted it open. The space was tight but Rachel went through first, wiggling through the gap and disappearing inside. Tyler followed with more difficulty, his shoulders barely fitting. Marcus was halfway through when he heard it. A moan, close, from the backyard he'd just left. He twisted, stuck in the window, and saw one of them standing at the fence. A teenage boy, Morrison's son probably, face pale and streaked with blood. The thing tilted its head, looking directly at Marcus. Its mouth opened. Marcus lunged forward, Tyler's hands grabbing his arms and yanking him through the window. He tumbled to the floor inside just as the moan erupted from the yard outside. It was answered immediately by hundreds of voices from the street. The horde had heard the dinner bell. They had minutes, maybe seconds, before this house was surrounded. "The basement," Marcus gasped. "Move." They ran through the dark house, finding the basement door in the kitchen. Tyler yanked it open and they plunged down into darkness as above them, the sound of breaking glass and splintering would announce the arrival of the horde. The Kowalski house, their salvation, had just become their tomb. The basement door slammed shut behind them and Tyler threw the deadbolt, a heavy metal lock that Frank Kowalski had probably installed for exactly this kind of scenario, though he'd likely imagined looters rather than the living dead. Marcus fumbled in the darkness, hands searching the wall until he found a light switch. Fluorescent bulbs flickered to life, revealing exactly what Beth had promised. The basement was a prepper's paradise. Metal shelving units lined every wall, stocked with canned goods, bottled water, batteries, medical supplies in clear plastic bins. A gun safe stood in the corner, and along the back wall, a workbench held tools and what looked like radio equipment far more sophisticated than Marcus's old ham radio setup. "Holy shit," Tyler whispered, staring at the supplies. "There's enough here for months." Above them, the house shook. The horde had arrived. They could hear the creatures flooding through the main floor, knocking over furniture, breaking everything in their mindless search for prey. Footsteps, dozens of them, thundered across the ceiling. The moaning was deafening even through the floor, a choir of the damned that made rational thought nearly impossible. "The door," Rachel said, staring at the basement entrance. "Will it hold?" Marcus examined the door. Solid steel, reinforced frame, the deadbolt looked military grade. Frank Kowalski had built this basement to withstand anything. "It'll hold," he said with more confidence than he felt. "But we're trapped down here." "Trapped with food, water, and supplies," Rachel countered, already moving to inventory the shelves. "We could do worse." Tyler had found the gun safe and was examining the electronic lock. "Anyone good with numbers?" "We need the combination." Marcus joined him, running his hands over the safe. It was a beautiful piece of equipment, biometric scanner and keypad, completely impenetrable without the code. He was about to suggest looking elsewhere for weapons when he noticed something. A piece of paper taped to the back of the safe, barely visible. He peeled it off and read Frank Kowalski's handwritten note: "If you're reading this, I'm probably dead and you need these supplies. Combination is 1-0-2-4, my daughter's birthday. Use them wisely. Protect the living. Frank." Marcus's throat tightened. Frank Kowalski, the man he'd barely known, had left a gift for survivors he'd never meet. He punched in the code and the safe clicked open, revealing an arsenal. 3 rifles, 2 handguns, a shotgun, and boxes of ammunition neatly organized by caliber. "Frank, you beautiful paranoid genius," Tyler breathed, reaching for one of the rifles. "Everyone know how to shoot?" Marcus shook his head. Rachel said, "I've been to a range a few times." "I grew up hunting with my dad," Tyler said, checking the rifle with practiced efficiency. "I can teach the basics, but not now. Now we need to let the others know we made it." Rachel was already at the radio equipment, more sophisticated than anything they'd been using. She powered it on and adjusted frequencies. "This is Rachel Kim calling any survivors on our network. Marcus, Tyler, and I made it to the Kowalski house. We're secure in the basement with significant supplies. Does anyone copy?" Static, then Garrett's voice burst through, thick with relief. "Rachel. Oh, thank God. We heard the horde, saw them swarm the house. We thought you were dead." "Not yet. Status report, everyone check in." One by one, the voices came through. Garrett, still with Shannon and baby Emma. Beth and Harold, locked in their upstairs bedroom, whispering into the radio. The Morrisons had heard the radio chatter and found an old walkie-talkie, Derek's voice joining the network for the first time. But there was a new voice too, frightened and young. "This is Casey Palmer, 2289 Maple Street. Is anyone there? Please, I'm alone and they're trying to get in." Rachel pressed the transmit button. "Casey, we hear you. Where are you exactly? What's your situation?" "I'm in my parents' attic. They went to the store yesterday when this started and never came back. I'm 17. I'm alone and I'm scared and I can hear them in the house downstairs. I don't know what to do." Marcus looked at Rachel and Tyler. They were thinking the same thing. Casey's house was 2 properties beyond the Williams, in the opposite direction from where they'd come. Unreachable with the horde filling the streets. "Casey, listen to me carefully," Rachel said, her medical student training showing as she slipped into calm authority. "You need to stay absolutely quiet. Do you have food and water up there?" "Some. I grabbed what I could. Maybe 3 days worth if I'm careful." "That's good. You stay put. We're working on a plan to get everyone somewhere safe. Can you do that? Can you stay quiet and wait?" A pause filled with muffled crying, then, "Yeah. Yeah, I can do that. Just please don't forget about me." "We won't. I promise." Rachel released the button and sagged against the workbench. "A promise I don't know how to keep." The basement fell into heavy silence broken only by the continued chaos above. Marcus explored the space while Tyler organized the weapons and Rachel cataloged medical supplies. In the back corner, behind a stack of water cases, Marcus found something interesting. A door, painted the same color as the walls, easy to miss. He opened it and found a narrow tunnel, concrete walls, leading into darkness. His heart rate picked up. "Guys, come look at this." They gathered around the tunnel entrance. Tyler shined a flashlight down its length, the beam disappearing into the distance. "It goes somewhere. Another exit maybe? Or it connects to another building," Marcus suggested. "Some of these old houses have tunnels. Prohibition-era smuggling routes, Cold War bunkers. Frank Kowalski would absolutely have built himself an escape route." Rachel grabbed the radio. "Harold, you said you knew Frank Kowalski pretty well, right? Did he ever mention anything about tunnels or underground construction?" Harold's whispered response came back. "Oh, well yes actually. He and the Driscoll family 2 streets over, they built some kind of shared storm shelter a few years back. Got all the permits, very official. Said it was for tornadoes but we all thought he was just being paranoid. That was before all this obviously. 2 streets over. If the tunnel connected to the Driscoll shelter, it might provide access to an entirely different neighborhood, potentially less infested. It was a thread of hope, thin but real. We need to explore it, Marcus said. Could be our way out of here. Or could be full of those things, Tyler countered. Could be collapsed. Could lead nowhere useful. Could be our only chance, Rachel finished. She looked at both of them. We rest first. Eat something. Process what just happened. Then we make a plan. Agreed? Marcus realized he was shaking, the adrenaline finally wearing off. They'd made it, barely, through a nightmare run that should have killed them. Tyler looked equally rattled. Rachel was holding it together but her hands trembled slightly as she distributed water bottles and canned soup from Frank Supplies. They sat on the basement floor, backs against the shelving units, and ate cold soup directly from the cans. Above them, the horde continued its rampage through the house, but the sounds were becoming less frantic. Without prey to chase, the creatures were losing interest, their attention spans as dead as their bodies. My sister Amanda was at County General when it started, Marcus heard himself say, breaking the silence. She called me. I heard them break into her hiding spot. I heard her die and I couldn't do anything. Rachel reached over and squeezed his hand. I'm sorry. My parents are in Phoenix, Tyler offered. I've tried calling 100 times. Lines are all down. I don't know if they're alive or dead and not knowing is worse than anything. My whole family is in Seattle, Rachel said quietly. Mom, Dad, 2 brothers. I was supposed to visit next month for Thanksgiving. Kept putting it off because of school, because I was too busy. What if I never see them again? What if the last thing I said to my mom was that I was too busy to talk? They sat with their grief, their fear, their guilt. Outside this basement, the world had ended. But in this moment, they had shelter, supplies, and each other. It would have to be enough. Marcus pulled out the radio. Everyone's still out there, listen up. We found something. Might be a way to get more people to safety. Give us time to check it out. In the meantime, stay quiet, stay safe. We're going to get through this. As he spoke the words, he tried to believe them. Somewhere above, the sun was setting on the second day of the apocalypse, and they were still alive. That had to count for something. Marcus woke to darkness and silence. The fluorescent lights had been turned off to conserve power, and above them, the horde had finally moved on, leaving only occasional creaks and settling sounds from the ravaged house. He checked his watch, 4 a.m. on the 3rd day. Rachel was already awake, sitting by the radio equipment with a dim flashlight, monitoring the frequencies. Tyler snored softly against a pile of supply boxes, the rifle cradled in his arms even in sleep. Anything? Marcus whispered, joining Rachel. She shook her head. Garrett checked in an hour ago. Shannon's fever broke, just stress like she thought. Baby's quiet. The Morrisons are okay. Beth and Harold made it through the night. Casey's still in her attic, scared but alive. She paused. There's something else. I've been scanning frequencies, listening to broadcasts from outside our area. Marcus, it's everywhere. Every city, every state. The emergency broadcasts have stopped. The government safe zones all fell. There's scattered military still fighting, but mostly it's just survivors like us, trying to make it one more day. The weight of it settled over Marcus like a shroud. This wasn't a local disaster that could be contained. This was the end of the world as they knew it. Then we make a new world, he said, surprising himself with the conviction in his voice. We survive. We find others. We rebuild. What else can we do? Rachel smiled, tired but genuine. When did you become an optimist? About 30 seconds ago. I'm trying it out. They woke Tyler and prepared to explore the tunnel. Each took a flashlight, a weapon, and a backpack with water and supplies. If the tunnel was compromised or led nowhere, they'd need to backtrack quickly. If it led somewhere useful, they might need to move fast and bring others through. The tunnel entrance yawned before them like a throat, concrete walls disappearing into absolute darkness. Marcus went first, baseball bat in hand, flashlight cutting through the gloom. Rachel followed, then Tyler with the rifle. The tunnel was narrow, barely wide enough for two people to walk side by side, ceiling low enough that Tyler had to duck. Their footsteps echoed strangely in the confined space. The air was cool and stale, tasting of earth and concrete. Marcus counted his steps, trying to estimate distance. 50 feet. 100. 200. The tunnel stretched on, occasionally sloping downward, then leveling out. Water dripped somewhere in the darkness, a rhythmic plinking that played tricks on his nerves. How far is 2 streets? Tyler whispered. Quarter mile maybe. Rachel answered. We should be getting close. As if summoned by her words, the tunnel opened into a larger space. Marcus swept his flashlight around and found himself in a concrete chamber about the size of a 2-car garage. Shelves lined the walls here too, stocked similarly to Frank's basement. The Driscoll shelter. And along the opposite wall, another door. Tyler tried the handle. Locked from the other side. He knocked, 3 soft raps that seemed thunderous in the enclosed space. They waited. Nothing. He knocked again, louder. This time, a voice filtered through, muffled and suspicious. Who's there? Survivors, Tyler called back. We came through the tunnel from the Kowalski house on Maple Street. We're not infected. We're looking for safe passage. Silence, then the sound of locks disengaging. The door cracked open and a flashlight beam hit them, blinding. Hands where I can see them. They complied, squinting into the light. The door opened wider, revealing a tall man in his 50s, holding a handgun with the confidence of someone who knew how to use it. Behind him, Marcus could see more people, families huddled in what looked like a finished basement. Jim Driscoll, the man said, lowering the gun slightly. Frank Kowalski was my friend. If you came through his tunnel, you're either legitimate survivors or the smartest zombies I've ever seen. Going to assume the former. Marcus Webb, Rachel Kim, Tyler Moss. There are more survivors in our neighborhood, trapped in their houses. We found Frank's supplies and the tunnel. We're trying to find a way to get everyone somewhere safer. Jim studied them for a long moment, then stepped aside. Come in. We need to talk. The Driscoll basement housed 15 people, 3 families who'd made it to Jim's house in the early hours of the outbreak. They'd been managing, rationing supplies, staying quiet. But like Marcus's group, they were trapped, surrounded by the dead with no clear plan forward. The horde moved through here yesterday, Jim explained, showing them a map he'd drawn of the surrounding area. Came from downtown, thousands of them, just flowing through the streets like a river. Most have moved on, heading west toward the suburbs. But there's still hundreds scattered around, maybe thousands. Going outside is suicide. So we stay underground, Rachel said, studying the map. These old neighborhoods, how many houses have basements? How many might have connected them like you and Frank did? Jim's eyes widened with understanding. You want to build a network. Connect the survivors through basements and tunnels, move resources and people without ever going topside. Exactly. Some people have food but no medical supplies. Some have weapons but no food. Together, we're stronger. We can create a safe zone underground, right under their feet. It took 3 days to make it work. Using the radios, they identified 12 houses within a 4-block radius with survivors and basements. Teams moved through the tunnels and basements, breaking through walls, shoring up passages with materials scavenged from the houses above. It was exhausting, dangerous work. Twice they broke through into basements that weren't empty, finding the undead trapped below ground. Those rooms were sealed again, marked on the map as dead zones. But slowly, impossibly, the network grew. Casey Palmer was the first rescue. Tyler and Marcus went through 3 basements to reach her house, then called up to the attic where she'd been hiding for 5 days. She nearly sobbed with relief when Marcus's voice came through the heating vent, directing her to the basement access. Beth and Harold Williams were brought through next, the elderly couple moving slowly but steadily through the tunnels with Jim Driscoll's patient assistance. The Morrisons came with their 2 children, wide-eyed and traumatized but alive. Garrett finally left his house, bringing Shannon and baby Emma through the network to the central hub they'd established in Jim's expanded shelter. More survivors appeared, drawn by the radio broadcasts that Rachel transmitted every hour. A nurse named Patricia Chen who'd survived in her bathtub for 4 days. A mechanic named Luis Rodriguez who'd fortified his garage. A young couple, David and Jennifer Park, who'd hidden in their bedroom closet while the undead tore apart their home. By the end of the first week, 37 people lived in the underground network. They established rules, shared responsibilities. Jim and Garrett handled security. Rachel ran the medical bay. Tyler started teaching, keeping the children educated and occupied. Marcus found himself coordinating supplies and expansion, the unexpected logistics manager of the apocalypse. The world above remained a nightmare. Through carefully cracked windows and brief reconnaissance missions, they monitored the streets. The horde had mostly moved on, following some unknown instinct westward, but stragglers remained, dangerous and unpredictable. The dead owned the surface world now. But below ground, in basements and tunnels, in the spaces between the former world and the new one, humanity persisted. 2 weeks after the outbreak, Marcus sat in what they'd started calling the hub, the central chamber of their network. Rachel was teaching Patricia how to set up in 4-line. Tyler read to a group of children, keeping their minds off the horror just above their heads. Casey Palmer, who'd discovered a talent for radio operation, monitored frequencies for other survivor groups. Marcus, she called out. You need to hear this. He joined her at the radio station as she played back a recording. A military broadcast, weak but clear. Establishing a secure zone at Fort Hamilton, 60 miles northwest. All survivors, we have food, medical facilities, and protection. Make your way to Fort Hamilton. Repeat, Fort Hamilton is secure. There is hope. Marcus looked around the hub at the faces of people who'd survived the impossible. 3 weeks ago, they'd been strangers, neighbors who waved politely and complained about parking. Now they were a family, bound by shared trauma and the daily miracle of survival. We could make for the fort, Rachel said, joining him. 60 miles. It would be dangerous but possible. Or we could stay, Tyler added. Keep building. There might be others out there, trapped like we were, who need to find a network like this. Garrett approached, Shannon and Emma in his arms. Whatever we decide together. That's how we've made it this far. Marcus thought about Amanda, about all the people who hadn't made it, who died alone and afraid in those first terrible hours. They deserve to be remembered. They deserve to have their deaths mean something. We vote, Marcus said. Everyone gets a say. Fort Hamilton or stay and build. But whatever we choose, we do it as a community. We survived the day the zombies knocked on every street. We survived when survival seemed impossible. We can survive whatever comes next. As the group gathered to discuss their future, Marcus allowed himself a moment of something he hadn't felt since that first terrible morning. Hope. Not the naive hope of the old world, where tomorrow was guaranteed and death was distant. But the harder, stronger hope of survivors who'd looked into the abyss and refused to fall. The world above had ended. The dead walked and civilization had crumbled. But in the tunnels and basements, in the spaces survivors had carved from darkness and fear, something new was being born. Not a return to what was, but an evolution into what might be. Marcus picked up the radio transmitter and spoke into it, broadcasting to anyone who might be listening. This is the Maple Street Network. If you can hear this, you're not alone. If you're trapped, there's a way out. If you've given up hope, hold on one more day. We're here. We're alive. And we're not giving up. In the hub, people nodded. Children played. Families held each other. And somewhere above, the dead shuffled through empty streets, unaware that beneath their feet, humanity was learning to survive. The end.